Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. What if Naruto was the son of the Greek gods? Part -3. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this and comment for next part. And now let's start the fanfic. Artemis gave a small smile but covered it up by a scowl and screamed out, "I am not your little sister, I helped deliver you into this world." Am I right? Gabe repeated. No, you are wrong, mortal, thought all the immortals in the room. While the half-bloods just thought the same as their parents. Eddie scowled into his bowl of pretzels. The other two guys, Naruto noticed, passed gas in harmony. I think I am going to hurl, said all the goddesses. Except Artemis because she had spent time with pigs, assholes, boy, or even bastards at some point. Or as she called them for better purpose, a fine example of a disgusting males. But the moon goddess looked a little green. Fine, Percy said. He dug a wad of dollars out of his pocket and threw the money on the table. I hope you lose. So do we, thought gods and demigods alike. Before anything could be said or done, Naruto put a hand on Percy's shoulder and the money. What are you going to do? Questioned everyone in the throne room. Percy looked at Naruto oddly before he noticed the gleam in Naruto's eye. Oh, Gabe was so screwed. How? Ran through all the minds in the throne room. How about I play? You can take my money if I lose. Naruto said. Percy smirked. He knew from experience. I wonder how badly he beat you. Hopeful not too bad, mocked Annabeth. Percy just blushed and thought. He properly kicked my butt 6 ways to Sunday. And a lot of others at school too, that Naruto never lost at card games, and he didn't even know how to play some of them. That is talent, smiled Hermes. Everyone thinking how good their lives would be if they had that luck. I wonder if he would beat Chiron at Pinnacle. If he does then Taish herself must favor him, muttered Dionysus. What? A brat like you? Gabe said, eyeing Naruto. He is not a brat, you tuskless walrus, snarled out Thals. Afraid of being beat by a kid? Naruto smirked. Besides, I got $100, are you going to pass up on that? I wonder where he got all that much he could get, said Apollo. Well, his father is the god of wealth, smirked Hades. Demeter just rolled her eyes at her brother, son-in-law. Poseidon just sighed and said, can we please get back to the story so I can find out what happens to my son and Gabe's fate? That got Gabe's attention. Of course it did, thought everyone in the throne room. Even though he was mad, Naruto did have money. He would win it from this brat and rub it in his face. I don't think it is going to turn out that way, mortal, sneered out Hera. While Hestia just nodded her head agreeing with her sister. Fine, sit down and play. He is so going to regret that, smiled Thals. Good. Naruto sat down and leaned over to Percy. This will be over soon. Very soon, smirked Thals. Zeus looked at his daughter and frowned at her relationship with this son of Hades. You should get settled in, it is your place after all. Oh, how I wish I had a son like that, all the goddesses said except Artemis. She often thought about have a child but brushed it off because her hunters, especially Zoe, she considered her children. As the game began, Percy nodded and left. He hoped Gabe would so lose to Naruto. Well, do you think he would lose to a walking beer can, mocked Thals. Annabeth and Talia just smiled and high-fived Thals. Annabeth on the right and Talia on the left hand. Talia just thought her book self was awesome and couldn't wait for her appearance. He slammed the door to his room, which really wasn't his room. It's not, threatened and anger Poseidon. During school months, it was Gabe's study. What in God's name does he study? Shouted out everyone in the throne room. Then they looked at Percy for an answer to their question. Percy just struggled and said, nothing, absolute nothing. All the people in the room just chuckled and began to listen to Annabeth read. The man didn't study anything in there except old car magazines, but Gabe loved shoving Percy's stuff in the closet. Of course he act like an overgrown bully, angrily snapped Hestia. The Council of Gods just nodded their heads in agreement surprisingly. while Hera gave a small smile thinking they are becoming a big happy family finally. Leaving his muddy boots on my windowsill, and doing his best to make the place smell like his nasty cologne and cigars and stale beer. If he also hits Sally, then heads are going to roll. Ancient rules be damned, dangerous, thought Poseidon. Percy dropped his suitcase on the bed. Home sweet home. Oh joy. As he thought about other stuff, he didn't know how much time had passed. Properly only 2 hours or so, said Hades. Why would that be? Questioned Demeter. Because women poker games should on average only last that long, smirked Hades. Oh, muttered Demeter while she blushing madly. The rest of the occupants just snickered and giggled softly. He walked to his door in time to hear two things. Gabe's crying out, "Ah, sweet music to my ears," smiled Percy. Which he knew from experience that it was the cry of a loser. He is a loser, shouted everyone in the throne room. And his mom calling him. Ah, Sally, dreamily thought Poseidon. It seemed that she was home now. Which is good, smiled Hera thinking about how good of relationship a mother and son shared. How she wished she could share a relationship like Sally and Percy shared. Hera was a little saddened because her sons didn't treat her like a mother. For one, Ares was not loving because he loves bloodshed and also a god of war. But Hephaestus was the closest she would properly ever come close to that relationship, but she blew it up big time. She threw her son Hephaestus from Olympus when he was a baby when she thought he was imperfect. But as an apologue she made Aphrodite marry him. Worst mistake of the century. She truly loves Hephaestus as a son and deep down she wants to apologize for all the horrible things she had done to him. I think this day just got better. She opened the door and looked at Percy with a smile on her face. Oh, Percy. Ah, how sweet, squealed Aphrodite. She hugged him tightly. I can't believe it. You've grown since Christmas. Now that is a caring mother, snarled Hephaestus looking at Hera in a longing sort of way. But looked back to the book and remained silent. Thanks, Mom, Percy said. Her red, white and blue Sweet on America uniform smelled like the best things in the world. Chocolate, licorice, and all the other stuff she sold at the candy shop in Grand Central. Candy, thought all the demigods. She'd brought him a huge bag of free samples, the way she always did when he came home. You're lucky man, laughed Apollo and Hermes. Artemis just glared at them both, her twin and half-brother. So who is your friend out there beating everyone at poker? My son, smiled Hades. Oh, that is Naruto Uzumaki. He is a good friend from school. Percy replied. Good to know you have a friend. It sure is, smiled the females in the room while the males just nodded their heads. Sally Jackson said softly as she hugged him again. Mama boy, leered Ares. Hera just glared at Ares with disappointment. Hera sneered. Ares, you still live with your parents, so I wouldn't talk if I was you. Yes, madam, gulped Ares. Now on with the story, smiled Hera. Percy then began to tell her all about his school year at Yancey Academy. It seriously was not as bad as the headmaster said it was. It wasn't, joked Annabeth. Oh, shut it, wise girl, joked back Percy. He didn't really tell her much about the museum because it still freaked him out. I still remember it sometimes because it stands for the beginning of my demigod life, stated Percy. It's okay, seaweed brain, smiled Annabeth while had a small blush on her pretty face. I know, wise girl, blushed Percy. Oh, will you two quit will the lovey-dovey stuff, leered Ares. Aphrodite snapped at him, screeching out, no, keep on going, dears, don't listen to Ares. While Poseidon, Athena glared at each other thinking it's her fault that their son, daughter are falling in love with each other. Hestia just coughed to get everyone's attention and suggested that we finish reading. Did something scare you? Yep, some dangerous monsters, smiled Nico. That is the normal life of a demigod, laughed Percy with a smile on his face. No, Mom, Percy lied. Don't lie to your mother, snapped Hera. Sorry, replied Percy. Zeus coughed and questioned, could we please continue, wife? Hera just nodded her head and now glared at Zeus thinking about how unfaithful he is. But whatever happened seemed to revolve around both me and Naruto. He said, making her eyes widen. She knows, whispered the gods. Some were giving Poseidon a small glare for giving their secret away. But Poseidon waved his hand and said, clear-sighted mortal. So, Percy found a friend like himself. Everyone smiled because it is good to have friends to back you up if you get into trouble. That is good because if he ever got to that world, he would really need a friend. That is right, smiled the demigods. Mrs. Jackson thought to herself. From the other room, Gabe yelled, hey, Sally, how about some bean dip, huh? Figures, even if he is beaten, he is still a jerk. Yep, said everyone. Percy thought while grinding his teeth. Like everyone the throne room was doing right now. Oh, never mind. Your brat of a friend got it for us. Came Gabe's voice again. Thanks, Naruto, thought Percy. Percy gave a weak smile when he heard that. I so owe you for this, Naruto. I have a surprise for you, Sally said. Oh, I love surprises, said Hermes, Apollo, and Aphrodite. We're going to the beach. Percy's eyes widened. Montauk. Poseidon smiled dreamily and sighed. 3 nights, same cabin. When? She smiled. As soon as I get changed. He couldn't believe it. They hadn't been to Montauk the last 2 summers, because Gabe said there wasn't enough money. Yeah, because he drinks or loses it all anyways, sneered the females. He then looked at her hopeful and said, can Naruto come too? Ah, how sweet, smiled Aphrodite. Percy just blushed because he realizes how Aphrodite looks like Annabeth. He can pay, I am sure, after the beating he gave Gabe. Properly kicked H is good, smirked Thals. Percy smiled at her and nodded his head hoping that he did. She laughed and nodded her head. I don't see the problem with that. Wow, she is so nice. Hey Uncle P, you pick good women, shouted out Hermes and Apollo. While the others besides Zeus, because he is too proud, nodded their heads in agreement. With that they left his room and walked out to see a steaming Gabe and a smirking Naruto. Oh, he just got owned, laughed Percy, Hermes, and Apollo. The others in the throne room just rolled their eyes but smiled at Percy. Gabe's friends were looking at Naruto like he was the poker god. Well, he is a half god, said Hades. Gabe looked at them and regained his composure and said, you were in there a long time. So, screamed the females in the room. Apollo put his hands up and said, now ladies. The females just glared at the sun god and screamed back, to shut up. Oh, we were just talking about the trip. Sally said happily. He will properly try and deny you from going, spat Artemis. You are right, said Percy. Gabe's eyes got small. Just like his brain properly, smiled Athena. No owl head, he doesn't have a brain to begin with, came Poseidon. Who asked you, fish face? Hotly said Athena. Aphrodite just grinned and began to watch the show unfold. The trip? You mean you were serious about that? No, they weren't, they were planning on staying at home all summer for your enjoyment, snarled Artemis. Percy smiled gratefully at her and the goddess just nodded her head back. Apollo looked at the two questionable but said nothing. I knew it, Percy muttered. He won't let us go. He better, threatened Poseidon. Of course he will, his mom said evenly. Your stepfather is just worried about money. Yeah, money that is yours and Percy's, said Poseidon. The demigods in the room nodded their heads in agreement. That's all. Besides, she added, Gabriel won't have to settle for bean dip. I'll make him enough. 7-layer dip for the whole weekend. This is making me a little hungry, said Ares. Apollo and Hermes nodded their heads agreeing with their half-brother. Guacamole. Sour cream. The works. Ah, bribery, fondly said Hermes. Gabe softened a bit. So this money for your trip, it comes out of your clothes budget. No, not the cloths, screamed out Aphrodite while whimpering a little. Right, because I lost most of mine to this brat. Like you would pay even if you won, snapped Percy. The females nodded their heads. While the men were thinking what a disgusting mortal, maybe it is a monster. The fat man said while jutting his pudgy finger at Naruto, who had an innocent look on his face. Yes, always look innocent, smiled Hermes. The others in the throne room just chuckled at Hermes' antics. Yes, honey, Sally said. And you won't take my car anywhere but there and back. Maybe a little detour, innocently said Percy while the other demigods just grinned. We'll be very careful. Yeah, right, gonna blow it up just to see this mortal's reaction, snorted Zeus. Gabe scratched his double chin. Ew, that's so disgusting, thought the goddesses and demi-goddesses. Maybe if you hurry with that 7-layer dip. And maybe if the kid apologizes for interrupting my poker game. What, he just asked you a simple question and you also forced him to fund your poker addiction, shouted out everyone in the throne room. Maybe if I kick you in your soft spot, Percy thought. Do it, seaweed brain, whispered Annabeth. Come on, kelp head, what are you waiting for, smiled Talia. And make you sing soprano for a week. The guys in the room covered up their manhoods and shivered just thinking about it. While the Hera looked thoughtful at her unfaithful husband. Zeus paled instantly when he caught sight of Hera's thoughtful look. He looked to his mom and it was a silent agreement that he had to be nice to Gabe if this was going to work. Must have been hard for you, Perce, said Nico. Percy smiled and said, it was my little cousin. Nico screamed out, I am not little. I'm sorry, Percy muttered. I'm really sorry I interrupted your incredibly important poker game. Please go back to it right now. You can detect sarcasm throughout this whole sentence, sang Thals. All the other individuals in the room just thought for a moment and nodded their heads agreeing with Thals. Gabe narrowed his eyes, trying to detect sarcasm in what Percy said. If he can't detect that sarcasm, then he is a bigger idiot than I thought everyone except Percy himself. The reason is that he knew what would happen because it already did. Yeah, whatever. Wow, went through everyone's head. He then turned to Naruto. No more for you. Go away. He just got owned by a 12-year-old boy, laughed Percy and the rest of the demigods. The gods just shook their heads and thought, are we that childish? Naruto just shrugged and walked over to Percy and his mom. Oh, Naruto, would you like to come with us? She asked. Ah, how sweet, commented the goddesses. The males just struggled their shoulders and thought, I will never understand girls. Sure. Are you sure you want someone like me on board? Yes, you are Percy's friend after all, so you must be a good kid. Yeah, right, giggled Thals. While gods and demigods alike just looked at her confused. Thals then said, Naruto is more powerful than Percy and attracts more monsters. The gods, goddesses and demigods, demi-goddess nodded their heads in understanding. They began to listen to the book again with newfound interest. Sally replied, making Gabe rolled his eyes. Okay then, I hope you don't mind me paying for my stuff since I now have quite a bit of money. I wonder how much, thought everyone in the throne room. Naruto said, pocketing his money, which was about $500. Wow, exclaimed the demigods, and the immortals just looked impressed. I wonder if he could clean out all the money in a casino, thought Hermes and Apollo. He smirked when he heard Gabe complain about having to pay for Naruto's trip. Well, technically your friend's money could pay for their trip and he could spend your money elsewhere, said Annabeth. Thank you, Sally said with a smile because she heard it too. She's so sweet, squealed Aphrodite. Poseidon grinned fondly and whispered, that is the reason why I was drawn to her. Once we get to Montauk, we'll talk more about whatever you've forgotten to tell me, okay? Well, she is smart. I wonder how fish brain here got Sally, muttered Athena. Poseidon glared at her and said, it was love bird brain. Ah, that is sweet, squealed out Aphrodite again, making the people in the room cover their ears. She said to Percy. Naruto just knew that he told his mom about a little of what happened. Not the whole truth, but also not a lie. I like it, smiled Hermes and Apollo. Oh Naruto, do we need to go to your place for you to pack? Shadow travel is the best powers to have ever, shouted out Nico while Hades smiled at his son. Before Gabe could complain, Naruto replied, nah, I got my stuff with me. Since I hung out at Percy's dorm at Lot, I hardly ever went home to my apartment, which is the halfway point from here to school. Well, that is convent, said Percy. Percy also wondered if Naruto ever watched over him when we were separate. Oh, okay then, Mrs. Jackson said, thinking that Naruto probably left his stuff somewhere near here. If he is a ninja, then doesn't he have it on him? Questioned Apollo. The room became silent, not even a cricket chirp. Apollo looked around, but his eyes landed on Artemis, his twin. She had a shocked look on her face. Finally, after a couple seconds, she shouted out, "Who are you and where have you done with my brother?" Apollo just stuck out his tongue out at her. Hermes whispered to the demigods and said, "Watch this in 3, 2, 1, and 0. The retaliation of an anger Artemis was a sharp silver arrow to her brother's face. The room was silent for a moment, then laughter filled the once silent room. After the gods and demigods alike calmed down, Thal said, "Oh, and to answer your question, Apollo, he would have his stuff in the form of storage seals." She then gave Percy a smile and went to make the dip for the fat dip. An hour later, they were all ready to go. "Get out of there and leave that horrible mortal, Sally," shouted Poseidon and all of the other goddesses. Athena scowled, thinking how she agreed with her rival, but shrugged her shoulders because when you are talking about Gabe, even the bitterest rivals can get along. Naruto had a backpack on now and Sally wondered where it had come from. "Seals," fondly smiled Thals while the others in the room looked at her questionable but said nothing. Percy just smiled. "If only you knew, Mom." Gabe watched as Naruto and Percy put all the bags in the car. The ugly man groaned about losing his wife's cooking and then his car all weekend, which, unlike him, was cool. "Very," said Percy, but thought back on the fate of the poor Camaro. "Stupid bull man," thought Percy. It was a 78 Camaro. "Not a scratch on this car. Brain boy, poker brat," he warned them as they loaded the last bag. "Not one little scratch." Naruto just gave him a saluted as the fat man lumbered back in the apartment. Suddenly a rainbow appeared in the throne room and a voice came through. It was Iris, goddess of rainbows and minor goddess of messengers to the gods. "My lords and ladies," Iris said. "What do you want, Iris?" questioned the Olympians. "Well, it is about the story you are currently reading," answered Iris. "Well, come on then, what is it?" boomed Zeus, growing impatient. "Well, in the battles in the series will be shown in the rainbow like a movie as the book is being read. It will also be in the person's mind who reading the book so they are not complaining if they are reading Aries cough." The gods nodded their heads and said, "Thank you, Iris, for the message." Iris said, "You're welcome, my lords and ladies," and the rainbow disappeared just as it had appeared. He knew that Gabe really pissed Percy off and he now understood why. "Anyone would if they had a nose and half of a brain," muttered Athena. The others in the room smirked how funny Athena can be and how she is right as always. He was getting pissed at this guy as well. "Kick his Naruto," shouted everyone in the throne room with a smile on their faces. He then say Percy make that odd gesture that Grover did on the bus and whatever he did worked because as soon smelly Gabe was in the doorway, the screen door slammed shut and probably sent the man flying. "Good job, kid," laughed Hermes and Apollo, smiling at Percy. Percy blushed when Annabeth grabbed his hand. Athena glared at the son of Poseidon with fury and it looked like she wanted to throw a dagger or a sharp pointy objects at her rival's son. Athena thought, "How dare that spawn of Poseidon bewitch my favorite daughter into liking him." The two boys quickly got in the car and Percy told his mom to step on it as they didn't want to feel Gabe's wrath. Percy flinched thinking about how his mom would Gabe gone through with that pig. After a bit, Naruto could not help but laugh at what he was happened. Though, that weird gesture Percy used had energy similar to chakra. "Wait, what is chakra anyways?" shouted out Apollo. "Chakra is a mixture of spiritual and physical energies within the body and can do amazing feats that would likely be impossible for anyone else," said Thals. Athena and Annabeth looked interested but remained silent for the time being because she would have to talk to Thals or better yet Naruto when he comes here. Odd. 4x. Once they got there, Naruto smiled as he loved places like this. They set their stuff in the cabin that they got and messed around till it was dark out. No, you have to party, exclaimed Apollo and Hermes. You do realize that is a party in their eyes at that age, idiot, snapped Artemis. Oh, relax, sis, I was just kidding, smiled Apollo. Artemis just glared coldly at her twin but said nothing. They were currently sitting around a small fire, roasting hot dogs and marshmallows. Oh, I love marshmallows, said Percy. Nico and Thal's Talia just nodded their heads in agreement with their cousin. Annabeth just rolled her eyes but thought, marshmallows are good. Mom, what was my father like? Ah, he wants to learn about his real father, squealed Aphrodite. Ares just groaned while Aphrodite just glared at in which he paled. Percy asked with some courage. He was kind, Percy, she said. Tall, handsome, and powerful. But gentle, too. You have his black hair, you know, and his green eyes. He really does, said everyone once everyone had a closer look at Percy and Poseidon. Poseidon smiled proudly at his son and Percy smiled back. She fished a blue jelly bean out of her candy bag. I wish he could see you, Percy. He would be so proud. I am, and I also wish I could see our children, and we are always proud of our children no matter what, Poseidon said. Everyone else nodded their heads in agreement in what the sea god said. Percy looked a little sad at that. Naruto thought that the kid was thinking about how his father would be proud of him with all that happened. Little Ms. Drama Queen happened, scowled Poseidon while pointing to Zeus. Zeus' face became bright red in anger and was about to yell at his brother when Hera slapped him. She smiled sweetly and said, Honey, enough, we are going to read this last chapter. Zeus looked a little scared and could only nod his head unless he wants to taste his wife's wrath later. How old was I? Percy asked. I mean, when he left. As soon as you were born, sadly said Poseidon. Percy just grinned at his dad but turned his attention to the book again. She watched the flames. He was only with me for one summer, Percy. Right here at this beach. This cabin. But he knew me as a baby. No, honey. He knew I was expecting a baby, but he never saw you. He had to leave before you were born, she said and then looked to Naruto, who had been silent for the conversation. Naruto, what are your parents like? Alive and well, smiled Thals. Naruto chuckled a bit, but it was hollow. I am an orphan. I never really knew my parents. But I was given some stuff of my father's. He had a journal that described my mom to be a fiery and tomboyish redhead. She loved pranks as much as I do. Do you think she is my child or that Hades has good taste in women? Fondly said Hermes. While Apollo just nodded at his half-brother's words. And she was also a very caring person. I was told she died in childbirth. That is sad, a good woman dying in childbirth without getting to know their son, said Hera and surprisingly Artemis. Now I heard that my dad was the best fighter around and an all-around nice guy. Who are you and what happened to my heartless brother? Scowled Demeter with a hint of amusement. Hades just rolled his eyes but grinned. Though if what I read is right, my mom wore the pants in that relationship. Ha ha ha, Hades being a, laughed the gods and goddesses expect Hades, who was blushing while cursing at his family. The demigods just looked at Hades in shock and disbelief. Artemis also smiled and thought, she would be a great huntress. That made Percy chuckle a bit and his mom had a big smile on her face. I am sorry about that, Sally said. Who is taking care of you? No one, because he is a badass, smirked Apollo and Hermes. Thals just shook her head and laughed. Thals said, well, he does live with his dad and also camp Half-Blood in the summer. All the gods and goddesses glanced envious at Hades but said nothing. Don't be. My grandfather was taking care of my before he died. Wait a minute, I thought Naruto got raised by himself, said Apollo. Naruto said, not wanting to tell them that he was killed. But I have been doing pretty well on my own anyway. Like a badass, smiled Thals. While Zeus looked shocked at his daughter and Talia just looked awestruck. Then Naruto had a sad look. He didn't know if his mom even wanted him around. Of course she did, said Aphrodite. Everyone looked confused, but Aphrodite said, "It was just a feeling." The others in the throne room just went back to reading while Aphrodite just thought on what these feelings were. He didn't think he could handle being alone like Naruto. "Are you going to send me away again?" "She has to, I am afraid," said all the goddesses. Percy asked her. "To another boarding school." She pulled a marshmallow from the fire. "I don't know, honey. She is so caring," said Hephaestus while glancing at his mother. Hera had the decency to lower her head down in shame for the stuff she did to Hephaestus all those eons ago. Her voice was heavy. I think we'll have to do something. Because you don't want me around." "Perseus Jackson," everyone shouted at the son of Poseidon, who blushed because it was the moment he wished he could take back on what he said to his mom. But he regretted the words as soon as they were out. "Good," said everyone. Her eyes welled with tears. She took his hand, squeezed it tight. "Oh, Percy, no. I have to, honey. For your own good, I have to send you away." This made Naruto quirk an eyebrow. "Okay. The way she is saying this means she knows something like Grover and Mr. Brunner." "She does," said everyone in the throne room. "Because I'm not normal," Percy suddenly said. You say that as if it's a bad thing, Percy. But you don't realize how important you are." "She right, you know," said Annabeth, but blushed and looked away from Percy. Percy smiled at Annabeth and looked at the book again with a small blush on his face. "I thought Yancey Academy would be far enough away. I thought you'd finally be safe." "Safe from what?" "Oh, anger, immortals and monsters," smiled Nico, Annabeth, and Talia. Percy just shook his head and Thals just laughed. Percy asked though when he locked eyes with her, all the memories of weird shit happening to him had surfaced. Before anything else was said, Naruto cut in. "Percy, not being normal is not that bad. I mean, look at me. I have this powers and I am fine." "A lot of powers, that is for sure," said Thals. The gods and demigods just looked questionable at Thals, but she just said, "It's in the book." Mrs. Jackson looked at him oddly and he sighed knowing that he would have to show her. He held out his hand and swirling ball of energy formed in his hand. "Interesting, it describes he can control air and maybe other elements," said Athena. While the others looked interested as well and paid more attention to the book. Percy's eyes widened and said, "You never showed that one to me, only those shadow clones." Shadow. Could he be just like Percy, a son of the big three? "Right as always, Sally," said Annabeth, Nico, Percy, and Talia. Sally thought as she eyed the ball before it dissipated. She gave Naruto a grateful look and continued on. "I've tried to keep you as close to me as I could," she said to Percy. "They told me that was a mistake. It is because of monsters' attack," said some of the gods. But after some glares from the goddesses back down. "But there's only one other option, Percy, the place your father wanted to send you. And I just can't stand to do it. It is a parent's hardest decision to let their children face the world on their own," said Hestia and Hera. "My father wanted me to go to a special school. No, a summer camp, and it is called Camp Half-Blood," said the demigods. "Not a school," she said softly. "A summer camp, and apparently it is a place you both need to go to." "Yeah, they sure do," said Thals. Both boys just looked at her oddly. Naruto never heard anything about a camp in the letter he got from his dad. "But there is no cabin for Hades at camp," said Nico. "Maybe there is a cabin in that scroll of his," said Percy. Nico just nodded his head and said, "That is pretty logical. Percy, don't hurt your brain too much." Percy just huffed and looked away from his cousin. "I'm sorry, Percy," she said, seeing the look in his eyes. "But I can't talk about it. I couldn't send you to that place. It might mean saying goodbye to you for good." All of the goddesses looked sympathetic at the book. "For good? But if it's only a summer camp." Percy trailed off as he saw the tears in his mom's eyes. "A woman's second most powerful weapon," said all of the gods and male demigods. The goddesses and demi-goddesses just smiled. 4x. It was storming out, but both boys were sound asleep and they were having the same exact dream. That is kind of creepy, laughed Percy, Nico, and Talia. It was storming on the beach, and three beautiful animals, a white horse. Poseidon, said the gods and goddesses, and Poseidon smirked. A golden eagle. Oh great mama's boy or drama queen, Lord Zeus, said Hades and Poseidon. While the other gods and goddesses besides Zeus laughed. And pitch black raven, Hades, said the gods and goddesses, and Hades smiled. We're trying to kill each other at the edge of the surf. Well, the raven was not doing much. It just hovered in midair, watching the two fight, and only with a mild look of interest. Of course it would attack at certain times. The eagle swooped down and slashed the horse's muzzle with its huge talons. The horse reared up and kicked at the eagle's wings. The raven then decided to claw at the eagle a bit before doing the same to the horse. Staying neutral, Hades, said the gods and goddess. As they fought, the ground rumbled, and a monstrous voice chuckled somewhere beneath the earth, goading the animals to fight harder. Kronos, shuddered the immortals in the room, and the light in the room dimmed slightly. The other gods and goddesses just glanced at Zeus. But they saw Zeus slumped in his throne and closed his blue eyes before sighing. Percy and Naruto ran toward them, knowing they had to stop them from killing each other, but the problem was that they were running in slow motion. Stupid powers, said Percy and the other demigods. They knew they would be too late. They saw the eagle dive down, its beak aimed at the horse's wide eyes, while the raven decided to help out its flying companion. Oh, Uncle Poseidon, you just got double-teamed, said Apollo. Poseidon waved his hand and splashed Apollo's face with 10 gallons of Arctic water. The two boys had enough and screamed, no. Thankfully it was just a dream, and they woke up with a start like it was a nightmare. Sometimes dreams are nightmares, said Athena. Annabeth just nodded her head, agreeing with her mother. Outside, it really was storming. No duh, Zeus is having a fight with his brothers, said all of the goddesses. The kind of storm that cracks trees and blows down houses. Wow, strong storm. That means Zeus is really pissed off, or his everyday self, remarked Poseidon and Hades. Zeus glared at them and said, I am going to kill you someday. The brothers laughed and said, we love you too, brother. Zeus bellowed out, silence. There was no horse, eagle, or raven on the beach, just lightning making false daylight, and 20-foot waves pounding the dunes like artillery. Now Poseidon is furious. What is going on? A war? Questioned the gods. Athena thought about how her father and her uncles could be furious about to start a war about. Though everyone once in a while they saw that the lightning was covered in black fire, or sometimes they also saw steaming hot water fly up into the sky, but it was a sickly black color. Geez, Dad and Uncle P and Uncle H, are you at war with Dad? Questioned Apollo and Hermes. Ares also wanted to know because he absolutely loved war because he is a war god. This shit never happens. With the next thunderclap, Percy's mom awoke. She sat up, eyes wide, and said, hurricane. Percy knew that was crazy. Long Island never sees hurricanes this early in the summer. Uncle P, how could you forget about the time of the year? Mocked, said Apollo. Poseidon waved his hand again and another 10 gallons of Arctic water splashed on his face. But the ocean seemed to have forgotten. Why, Uncle P, why? Wailed Hermes and Apollo. Artemis snapped at the two immature gods, saying, will you two shut up for 2 minutes? There was a silence in the throne room for 2 minutes, and Artemis asked the question on what they were doing. Hermes and Apollo said, victorious. We win, sis. We have stayed silent for 2 whole long terrible minutes. Artemis felt the need to bang her head on her throne while saying, stupid, 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 over and over again. Over the roar of the wind, he heard a distant bellow, an angry, tortured sound that made his hair stand on end. Wonder what monster that is, thought all of the gods and goddesses. Then a much closer noise, like mallets in the sand. A desperate voice, someone yelling. Pounding on our cabin door. Hopeful it is a monster so we can have some action, shouted out Ares. The gods and goddesses just shook their heads and sighed at the antics of the war god. Mrs. Jackson sprang out of bed in her nightgown and threw open the lock. Grover stood framed in the doorway against a backdrop of pouring rain. Properly gave Sally a heart attack, said Annabeth. While Talia and Nico agreed with Annabeth because Rule 1 is never oppose Annabeth's logic. The reason is that you will most definitely lose. But Percy gets it because he lets Annabeth come up with the plan. But he wasn't exactly Grover. Properly in his true form with hooves and horns in all its glory, smiled Thalls. Searching all night, he gasped. What were you two thinking? They weren't like always for Percy and sometimes for Naruto, said Thalls. While the females just nodded their head and the guys just sighed. Mrs. Jackson looked at them in terror, not scared of Grover, but of why he'd come. To bring demigods to camp, said Athena and Annabeth. Athena just smiled at her daughter proudly while her daughter simply blushed. They were too shocked at the moment to register that however. I thought Naruto would get it, said Annabeth while Athena nodded her head. Sorry but Naruto was a knucklehead for a while and sometimes he still is, remarked Thalls. Because, instead of normal legs, Grover had legs that were like an animal's, sort of like a donkey or maybe a goat. I knew it, exclaimed Annabeth. Percy just put his hands on her shoulders and whispered, we have never doubted you, wise girl. Annabeth blushed bright red but snuggled in closer to Percy. Athena glared at our favorite son of the sea god with fury. Percy, she said, shouting to be heard over the rain. What happened at school? What didn't you tell me? Ozu kai alloy theo I. Grover yelled. Language satyr, do not speak my name like that, boomed Zeus. While Hera just slapped him on his face and said, will you shut up already, we know you hate that satyr because of your illegitimate daughter did not reach camp. Zeus just huffed but remained silent. It's right behind me. Didn't you tell her? What is? Questioned the gods and goddesses. While the demigods just smiled but remained silent and watching for the reactions of the immortals in the room. You mean the kindly one you blabbed about or the old crones who are the fates? Now Sally will freak out but will try her hardest to save Percy and Naruto, said Annabeth. Percy, Talia Thalls, and Nico agreed with her. Naruto shouted above the noise, making Percy's mom widen her eyes in horror. She grabbed her purse, tossed Percy and Naruto a rain jacket, and said, get to the car. All of you, go. They are on their way to Camp Half-Blood, yelled Hermes and Apollo. But was silenced by a couple of silver arrows sailed through the air and almost hit them. Artemis just smiled while cleaning her bow and looking innocently at the others in the throne room. Grover ran for the Camaro, but he wasn't running, exactly. He was trotting, shaking his shaggy hindquarters, and suddenly his story about a muscular disorder in his legs made sense to me. That would explain how he could run so fast and still limp when he walked. Good observation, Naruto, said Athena, and Annabeth nodded her head agreeing with her mother. Yep. We have entered the Twilight Zone. Did we mention we love this kid? Said Apollo and Hermes. Artemis just sighed and wished some of her hunters were here, namely Zoe and Phoebe. Naruto mumbled, but what is coming after us? He never got an answer because Grover quickly got in the car, not hearing him. He sighed and got in, going with the flow. Suddenly there was a bright flash of light in the throne room, and when it died down was a cloaked figure and two hunters. Now who are you and why have you disrupted our important meeting? Boomed Zeus. The two hunters looked baffled and nervous in the presence of an irritated Zeus. Artemis intervened because she didn't want two died hunters if she could help it. Especially her oldest hunter and best friend Zoe Nightshade. The lieutenant of her hunters for 2 millennia. The second hunter was identified as Phoebe, one of the last older hunters she had. But thankfully they said nothing, fearing that it would make Zeus anger, which the moon goddess was thankful. While Percy and the other demigods were speechless because here standing before them was Zoe Nightshade. The one that was turned into a constellation called the Huntress when she faced her father Atlas. Percy was the first one out of the demigods that came back to reality and whispered out, Zoe. Zoe saw Percy staring at her and glared hatefully at him. Before questioning Percy by saying, "What does thy want, boy?" Percy just blushed, then looked away and shuddering, "Nothing." Zoe bowed to her mistress and said, "What does milady want?" Artemis smiled fondly at Zoe before saying to her two hunters, "We are reading a book about a young hero from another dimension." Phoebe snorted and said, "Just what I always wanted to read about, a ungrateful boy." Artemis said, "That's enough, Zoe and Phoebe." Both hunters bowed, then said, "As you wish, milady," and became silent. Meanwhile, the cloaked person snorted. The gods and goddesses found it was a female voice. Their interest in the woman increased because she might be from the books. Zeus cleared his throat and demanded that she reveal herself or suffer the wrath of the gods. She chuckled but moved her hands to her hood and pulled down. The gods were speechless, and all of them were drooling or staring at the gorgeous woman standing before them in shock. She had red hair with pretty purple eyes and a toned body that would make even Aphrodite jealous. She wore a red silk dress that hugged her curves perfectly. Some would even mistake her for Aphrodite if she wasn't already in the room. Kushina's skin was fair and flawless, that would make most women jealous. Her deep crimson red hair fell down freely to her lower back. The mysterious woman laughed at the gods' faces. The gods and goddesses along with the demigods agreed wholeheartedly that her laugh was breathtakingly beautiful. Like small bells ringing or a soft lovely melody playing. Depended on the person, but this laugh sounded perfect. While her smile was perfect with her kissable pink lips and brilliant white teeth. She said, "I am Kushina Uzumaki, mother of Naruto Uzumaki and second wife of Hades." Aphrodite questioned, "Are you one of my daughter because you are was so beautiful, dear?" Kushina nodded her head slightly, then narrowed her exotic purple eyes and dangerous hissed out, "That doesn't mean I am defenseless or weak." After a pause she added, "If anyone disagree, then I will kick all of your asses to Tartarus and back." Artemis nodded her head in approval and decided that she would have made an excellent hunter. The males in the room nodded their heads while some were giving Hades a jealous look for getting a nice catch like Kushina along with his other wife Persephone. Kushina looked around for someone she knows, but her eyes landed on Hades. Her eyes lit up, then grinned brightly and ran to him. She wrapped her arms around him tightly. She then gave her husband a kiss on the lips and smiled at him saying, "I love you." Suddenly there was a second flash of light and it dimmed down to reveal the queen of the underworld herself. Demeter leapt out of her throne and hugged her precious immortal daughter, then asking her if she eats enough cereal. While Hades looked indifferent but had a look of love in his dark eyes. "Mother, will you stop worrying about me? I am a grown goddess now," exclaimed Persephone. Demeter wailed saying, how it is her no good husband's fault that her precious core turned on her. Persephone just rolled her eyes but turned to Kushina and asked how she was. Kushina looked shocked for a moment, but she got out of her stumble and shouted out, "You serious? Don't know me? I'm hurt." Persephone looked at her and said, "I'm sorry, but I don't know you." Kushina looked confused but then took a closer look around the throne room and came face to face with two Talias. How? She thought, but made her way to Thals and maybe help explain what the hell is going on. Kushina whispered, "Why am I here and why doesn't anyone recognize me?" "Well, you have been transported here to read a series of your son Naruto. Oh, and by the way, we are in a different dimension than ours." Kushina sighed and gave a quick thank you and asked if she could sit by her. Thals nodded her head and made room for Kushina while the demigods looked at her in awe and a little fear. Awe because this is the mother of the hero that we have been reading about, and fear because she was Hades' wife, or maybe that they don't know how powerful she is. "Well, now that introductions are done, why don't we settle for a nice warm dinner?" said Hestia. The gods and demigods nodded their heads while their stomachs growled in agreement. The occupants made their way to the dining hall in Olympus that could view camp if some of the gods or goddesses wanted to. They usually look at camp often to check up on their children. The image is invisible so the half-bloods can't see them, but they can see their children. The reason behind the images are invisible is because they would break the ancient laws. The dining room had 4 pillars at the corners of the room and a pillar every few feet that could fit a god through. The place was made from marble like ancient Greece temples and buildings. The silverware, dishes, and goblets were pure gold. The plates and goblets were filled with everything imaginable. For the gods and goddesses, plates and goblets were filled with nectar and ambrosia. After everyone was full, they went back into the throne room. Ares was trying to get Aphrodite's attention. But the love goddess's attention was directed at her different dimension daughter, Kushina. Oh, she wanted to ask her how Hades became her husband, how she first met him, how many dates did she go on, when was her first kiss, if she was immortal, or if she did a 3-way with Hades and Persephone. But most importantly, how her daughter's son Naruto loved life. Sorry if I sound like a pervert. Kushina was talking to both Annabeth and Athena while both were talking notes on anything important. But knowing them anything and everything was important, like how a shinobi can mold the elements or how many different elements one can wield. As Kushina talked about her world, she talked about how the moon was created by the Rakudo Sennin using the Jutsu Chibaku Tensai to entomb the 10-tailed beast or the Jubi. The other gods kept on staring at Kushina and wondered how Hades got to her before they did, because she sure was a beauty. Hermes had a glint in his eyes, then he finally went to her to see if her pranking skills were true. While Hades looked at his nephew in suspicion on what he was going to do with Kushina. He didn't know where the protectiveness came from but softly growled. On the other hand, Persephone was looking at Kushina with interest while trying to ignore her mother, which was difficult. Because she kept on getting an odd feeling like a sisterly love sometimes, or other times harem sister. Hera smiled at the scene of her family because her family were actually getting along and not fighting like always. Maybe this book can have some positive aspects like seeing through a demigod's eyes. Hera frowned, thinking how she sometimes envied some of the other gods and goddesses for have demigods. But struggled it off because she would never be unfaithful to her husband. No matter how angry she got or how unfaithful her husband would be. Who, by the way, can't keep it in his pants for not even a century. She sighed and wondered why Zeus even married her sometimes. Hera put some thought into it but sighed again, but began with a fake smile. Well, let's get you to your rooms to have a relaxing sleep so we can read tomorrow morning, smiled Hera. The gods and demigods with Kushina protested but was quickly silenced by Hera's glare.